The Monster's Ring by Bruce Coville, Chapter 2, With the Twist of the Ring. He was holding a small box. Across the top, in flaming red letters, were the words, The Monster's Ring. Russell smiled. He was very fond of monsters. In fact, he had the largest collection of monster magazines of anyone in the whole 5th grade. Using his fingernail, he slit the tape that held the box shut. Inside was a ring made of cheap metal. Set in its top was a green stone carved in the shape of a monster's face. Delighted, Russell took out the ring and slipped it onto his finger. As he did, a sudden chill ran through his body. He shook his head and he shivered a little. In the bottom of the box lay a neatly folded piece of paper. Curious, Russell lifted it out. The paper was old and very yellowed, and it crinkled as he unfolded it. At the top of the paper was a picture of a monster, the same monster as on the ring. Its arms were spread across the page as if holding everything written beneath it. Directly below the monster's chin, in big letters, were the words, How to Work the Monster's Ring. Work it, thought Russell. How could you work a ring? It must mean how to wear it. But who needed instructions on how to wear a ring? He read on. To change yourself into a hideous monster, place the ring on the ring finger of your right hand. Grasp it with your left hand. Turn the ring to the left as you repeat this chant. Russell shook his head in disgust. To change yourself into a hideous monster? He had sworn off that kind of garbage after he wasted all that money on that useless X-ray specs he bought from the back of the Muck Critter comic book. He crumpled the paper, crammed it into his pocket, and headed for home. His mother was waiting for him at the door. Where have you been, Russell? She asked. He could hear the worry in her voice. It was always there, no matter what time he got home. Out, he said with a shrug. Well, what have you been doing? He shrugged again. Nothing. Mrs. Craniker sighed. Well, supper's ready and you're not. Go get cleaned up. Go on. Hurry. Hurry up. Russell, hurry. Supper was a typical Craniker family meal. His mother fussed over him as he ate. She fussed over him a lot. His father talked on and on, and on and on, about some problem he was having at work. And Russell, who had no appetite, sat chasing peas around Mashed Potato Mountain with his fork. He was considering telling his parents about the problems he was having with Eddie, but his father had moved on to one of his pet theories, something about the future of civilization, and he wouldn't wind down for hours. Russell loved his father, but trying to get a word in edgewise when he was talking was like trying to stop a freight train by standing in front of it. Either way, you were bound to get run down. So Russell simply just tuned him out. Fortunately, Mr. Craniker didn't seem to care if anyone actually listened to him. As long as he was talking, he was happy. Russell often heard him at night chattering away over some work he had brought home from the office. He carried on a running dialogue with the television set and even argued back to the newspaper while he was reading it. The night wore on. Russell did his homework, then read some of a very spooky book called The House of the Clock in Its Walls. He had almost forgotten about the ring until it caught on the shirt he was wearing when he was undressing for bed. He grinned. The monster on the top was really neat. Oh, why not, he thought. No one will ever know if I made a fool of myself in my own room. He took out the directions and spread them on his dresser top. Then he gave the ring a twist, one only, as he whispered the chant from the top of the page. Powers dark and powers bright, I call you now, as is my right. Unleash the magic of this ring and change me into a monstrous thing. He waited. He felt really silly. Nothing happened. X-ray specs, he said, and he shrugged. He headed for the bathroom to wash up, more disappointed than he cared to admit. Halfway down the hall, though, Russell felt strange. He felt a strange sensation in his forehead, almost as if something was trying to break through the skin. It didn't hurt. It was just, I don't know, weird. He put his hand on his brow and he felt something sharp and hard. He tried to pull it off, but there was no luck. He ran to the bathroom and looked in the mirror and nearly fainted. He had horns coming out of his forehead. Horns an inch long, and they were getting longer and longer. He had mouth agape, that means like open. Russell watched the transformation. Suddenly, hair began to sprout from his face. He needed a shave. Shave? No, he needed a lawnmower. He touched the horns. They seemed to have stopped growing, mottled brown and yellow. They were just 3 inches long and ended in gleaming points, wickedly sharp. Beneath the horns, his brows met in the single shaggy line that ran straight across his forehead. Beneath that line flashed 2 yellow eyes, holding a strange hint of inner fire. His nose was flatter than the old prize fighter's, when it was nearly lost in the thick beard that hid the neck and chin. The backs of his hands were covered with curling black fur. He wanted to scream, no, that would only bring his parents. Suddenly, he realized that even though he was frightened, he was also excited. Strange as it was, this was the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him. He looked in the mirror and he snarled. The sight and sound made him jump. He tried again. Boy, would that ever do a number on poor Eddie. He chuckled at the idea, sounding like a very angry bear. This is ridiculous. He must be dreaming. He pinched himself to prove it. Unfortunately, his fingernails were now deadly claws. He drew blood, and the sharp pain convinced him that indeed he was awake. Panic set in. How long would this last? What if he couldn't turn back? The idea caught his mind and scared him witless. What would his mother say? What wouldn't his father say? This would give his dad material for hours of passionate, rambling speeches concerning the woeful tale of the thoughtless son who messed around with magic and was put into a hairy monster as punishment. Wait a minute. He hadn't finished reading the directions. Maybe it explained how to turn back. Opening the bathroom door, he peered out cautiously. Good. His parents were still downstairs. He stepped out and headed for his room. But as a monster, he did not have much self-control as when he was a kid. Without intending to, he began to stomp down the hall. Blom, blom. Russell! Cried a voice from below. Is that you? It was his mother. He froze. Russell? He had to answer her. If he didn't, she would come up to see what was going on. Straining to make his voice seem normal, he said, Yes, Mother, it's me. I was going to bed. Good night. He put a paw in his throat in horror. He sounded as if he was gargling with razor blades. Are you all right, Russell? You sound a little hoarse. I'm fine. Just got a little frog in my throat. Actually, it sounded more like he had a Gila monster in there. All right, called his mother. But if it's not gone in the morning, I'm taking your temperature and no arguments. Yes, Mother. Well, that was over. Now what? The directions, he thought again. I've got to look at those directions. Moving more cautiously now, Russell continued to his room. But the waxing moon just past the halfway mark was shining through his window. It caught his eye, and he gasped. He felt as if he were tied to his heart by this silver thread. He crossed to the sill, raised the window, and he leaned out. The moon was calling him. And deep within his monstrous breast, something stirred in answer, something that instead insisted he could stay inside no longer. Filled with longing, Russell gazed out at the night, all black and silver and magic. It was a good 15 feet to the ground, but somehow that didn't seem to matter. Suddenly, he just vaulted over and out the window. He landed in a crouch. Sniffing the air, he glanced around, then ran howling into the darkness. Dum, dum, dum. It's pretty good. All right. Enjoy.